I'm Roy Lee Lindsay with the North Carolina Pork Council, and I want everyone to remember, bacon makes everything better.
Welcome everyone to the Old North State Tailgate presented by NC Pork. I'm Chris Edwards. Great to be with David Glenn as always. Join us this week for our Old North State Tailgate and Traveling Sports Circus. It's the third round of the high school football state playoffs, and we'll be at Cardinal Gibbons with a big matchup, Clayton at Gibbons. So come find us at Gibbons from 5 to 7. Also, don't forget to subscribe to whatever this podcast or whatever platform you're watching or listening to us on, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or iHeart. We really appreciate the support. And tell your friends about us, too. And then this week on the David Glenn Show, Thursday morning, 9 a.m., it's Charles Davis from CBS Sports. And on Wild Dogs and Hogs, Wednesday at 9 a.m., Mike Waddell and Jimmy Collins have a long-ranging conversation about NIL, the portal, a really fun chat. So check that out. All right, DG, now time to break the huddle, presented by the Original Saltworks. And let's get in it. A couple of games that were down to the wire last week, an instant classic in Chapel Hill. How about the Tar Heels, a 47-45 double overtime win over the Duke Blue Devils?
Yeah, Chris, there was plenty of controversy in this game, as the fans have discussed since then, and we are going to get to some of that later. But let's start by giving the Tar Heels a lot of credit for putting up 47 points against an extremely well-coached Duke team under Mike Elko that has led the ACC in scoring defense for most of this season. Carolina still has plenty of problems with its own defense, as we saw again against the Blue Devils. And frankly, it should not have been such a close game, given that third-string true freshman Grayson Loftus was starting at quarterback for the Blue Devils. But in the end, Carolina's offense had to be great to pull out this win, and a lot of guys stepped up to make that happen. Drake May, one of the best quarterbacks in the country, 342 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 on the ground. Omarion Hampton actually has a chance to finish as the nation's leading rusher. He's number 2 right now in the country. He had 31 carries for 169 yards and a touchdown against the Devils. Tez Walker, one of the more talented wideouts in the country. He had 7 catches for 162 yards in Kenan Stadium on Saturday night. And Bryson Nesbitt, who's become the best pass-catching tight end in the ACC, he had 7 catches for 68 yards and that highlight reel touchdown in the corner of the end zone. He also deserves credit for that crazy play that should have been reviewed, that he was ultimately given credit for the reception rather than that becoming a game-turning interception for the Blue Devils. And one more bouquet for the Heels. Noah Burnett started this season as the Heels' backup place kicker. And he hits all 6 of his field goal attempts, all 3 of his extra points, some of them with the game on the line. And finally, let's give a little credit to the Carolinas fans. They've taken some deserved criticism this season and over many decades. They showed up in large numbers. They were loud all night. And they gave the Tar Heels that home field advantage that I think they desperately needed to win such a close game.
How about the Wolfpack of NC State? Really a dominant win for Dave Doran's team, 26-6 over Wake Forest. Brennan Armstrong, a really great performance as the Wolfpack quarterback after a lot of consternation for NC State going into that game last week.
Yeah, man, those are the 2 takeaways for me. The Wolfpack continues to win the old-fashioned way. Absolutely awesome defense, and then just enough offense through that crazy quarterback chaos that we discussed last week. Over the Pack's last 3 games, these are wins, remember, against Clemson, Miami, and now Wake Forest, the Pack is giving up less than 10 points per game. That is just an insane, incredible number in this offensive-oriented era of college football. Peyton Wilson has become one of the best defensive players in Wolfpack football history. And he had plenty of help against the Demon Deacons, including Savion Jackson on the line. And the Pack's cornerbacks, Aiden White and Shaheem Battle, man, they physically dominated. And eventually it looked like they mentally dominated a pretty good Wake Forest receiving core. On offense, as you mentioned, Brennan Armstrong back as the starter after the bizarro world MJ Morris midseason redshirt surprise. Armstrong managed the game well. He threw it well enough. He got the ball to star freshman KC Concepcion 8 times. 5 of those were on running plays. and Armstrong ran for almost 100 yards and a touchdown himself. And meanwhile, quick postscript to this one. For those who didn't see it, Wake coach Dave Clawson, arguably one of the best in program history, he was absolutely desolate after this game. I mean, near tears, saying that the Demon Deacons were not even competitive against the Wolfpack, how he was extremely disappointed in the players, the staff, and it starts with him, etc., especially given that we're now 10 games into the regular season. Remember, unless the Deacs win their last 2 games in the regular season, which seems highly unlikely since they're at Notre Dame this week, Dave Clawson's school record 7-year bowl streak will come to an end, and it's just an unpleasant surprise for all of those who have been following Wake football lately.
Maybe a pleasant surprise this weekend was Appalachian State. The Mountaineers go on the road and beat Georgia State 42-14. Really complete effort for Sean Clark's team.
Yeah, how about this? And a little wrinkle to this one. Georgia State is coached by App State alum Sean Elliott. And, of course, App State is coached by App State alum Sean Clark. I have seen some unhappy App fans suggest that Sean Elliott of Georgia State should be the guy to replace Sean Clark in Boone. But this, just for the record, was an absolute behind-the-woodshed beating by the Mountaineers. And it came at Georgia State, remember. Mm-hmm. App led this game 21-0 at halftime, 28-0 after 3 quarters. So put aside the final score. This was an annihilation, a curb stomping. And the Mountaineers clearly are playing their best football of the season here down the stretch, just as some have been calling for Sean Clark's job. Now this week, App has an even bigger challenge, but a huge opportunity to make another statement about the state of this program, given this trip to 10-0 James Madison that we're going to get to a little bit later in today's show. But this was one more big step in the right direction for Sean Clark and the Mountaineers.
All right, the final game we're going to talk about here in this opening segment is a tough day for NC Central. They get beaten by Howard 50-20 last week.
Yeah, man. About a month ago, NC Central, which is in position for maybe the best season in school history, was playing on national television at Morgan State. And at halftime of that game, it was 3-0 Eagles. And Trey Oliver, the head coach of Central, was interviewed. And he just said, I don't know where my guys' heads are on this road trip, especially in that game. He was worried about the offense. Well, this time, the Eagles, that time they figured out a way to win that game, a low-scoring game. This time, at Howard University up in D.C., Central's defense was the one that didn't show up. And Trey Oliver just couldn't find the right buttons to make the magic happen. The Eagles couldn't stop Howard's run. They couldn't stop Howard throwing the ball. And the Eagles' own star quarterback, Davius Richard, who ran a little and threw a little, he just didn't get any help on offense. So the Eagles return home with a bitter-tasting 50-20 defeat. That's probably going to cost them a trip to the Celebration Bowl, probably going to cost them a trip or chance at another HBCU national championship, which would be devastating, of course. Because of this head-to-head win over the Eagles, Howard is now in position to represent the MEAC in the Celebration Bowl as long as Howard wins this week, which is expected. We'll talk more about where the Eagles go from here a little bit later in today's show. But just as we mentioned, some steps forward for the Heels and the Pack and the Mountaineers, this was a huge step backward for the Eagles.
All right, DG, well, it's just about time to hit a break. But when we come back, it'll be our Sport Clips MVP of the Week presented by Sport Clips as Mike Waddell sits down with the coach, Jimmy Collins. But as we head into break, here are all the scores from last week's games involving North Carolina college football teams with our Jimmy scoreboard right here on the Old North State Tailgate.
Hey folks, David Glenn right here in Raleigh. One of my favorite restaurants for many years has been The Oak, Scratch Kitchen and Bourbon Bar. It's located on Lake Boone Trail, which happens to be a perfect location for a great meal and beverage if you're on your way to nearby Carter Finley Stadium or perhaps PNC Arena for a concert, Wolfpack or Hurricanes game, or other event. The menu is incredibly tasty and creative. The atmosphere is a lot of fun. The bourbon options are as high-end and varied as you'll find anywhere. The staff is super classy and first-rate, and I've just always loved the people, the food, and the overall vibe there. When I took Carolina Hurricanes owner Tom Dundon to lunch, yes, meaning the billionaire who owns the hockey team, I took him to the Oak. Seriously, it's that good. Learn more or make a reservation by visiting their website, theoakraleigh.com. That's theoakraleigh.com. Special thanks to Nick and Haley and their team for joining the family here at the David Glenn Show and the new North Carolina Sports Network.
Welcome back to our Old North State Tailgate presented by NC Pork. I'm Chris Edwards. Great to be with David Glenn. And it's time now for our Hot Reads of the Week presented by Lawson Insurance, High Street Insurance Partners. And DG, let's start here. Social media, popular place. You can voice a lot of concerns, give a lot of thoughts. And that platform seems to give people a lot of room to say whatever it is that they want to say.
Yeah, I once joked, Chris, that if I ever wrote a book about sports fans, just that topic specifically, it might be called Liars, Hypocrites, Conspiracy Theorists, and Other Sports Fans. And I say that in this context because, man, the complaints, for example, about UNC storming the field in Chapel Hill after beating, a good Duke team, but not a nationally ranked or undefeated Duke team. I am old enough to remember that 2 years ago, NC State fans rushed the field at Carter Finley Stadium after a win over a 6-6 Carolina football team. Now, my bottom line is I don't even really have a strong opinion about court storming or field storming. I kind of go with the flow. Probably my default position is life is short. Have fun when you can. And if that means rushing the court of the field after a somewhat modest victory, we'll go right ahead. It doesn't really bother me. But my request to everybody else is, whatever your point of view, don't be a freaking hypocrite. If you're going to go after another fan base for rushing the field or the court under middling circumstances, well, at least own up to the fact that your school has done it too. And in fact, in the example I gave, did so really, really recently. Whatever your point of view, apply it to the other guys, but apply it to yourself as well. Otherwise, I can and will call you a hypocrite. Meanwhile, there were complaints after the Carolina Duke football game of all kind. One of them was absolutely legitimate and on point. On that Bryson Nesbitt catch/Duke interception that I mentioned in the opening segment, that play absolutely, positively should have been reviewed. Why have review and replay if you're not going to review that crazy play, right? Mm-hmm. They screwed up. And remember, that's the guys in the booth screwing up more than the guys on the field. So don't be mad at the men in stripes for getting that one wrong. But some of the other complaints that occasionally rose to the level in the eyes of some fans as if there was a conspiracy, that the guys on the field wanted one team to win or the other. I can tell you after 37 years of covering college sports and a lot of pro sports as well, the refs mostly don't care who wins. In fact, overwhelmingly, they don't care who wins. In fact, the examples where they do are extremely rare and sometimes get people sent to prison if they care too much about who wins or loses. So I roll my eyes at the people who might otherwise be functional in their day-to-day lives, who jump all the way to the refs were out to get my team because a handful of calls went against their team in a given close game. What they fail to remember is if the Tar Heels had lost to the Blue Devils, you know what would have happened? Carolina fans would have circled 3 or 4 plays where there was a phantom holding call against them or another close call against them. The Duke fans in this example forget about those plays. What probably bothers me the most, though, there were complaints about an illegal lineman downfield on a UNC conversion. And I'm convinced that 90% of the people complaining don't even know the freaking rule. Where an offensive lineman is at the time a ball is caught is absolutely 100% irrelevant by rule the way college football works. Where that lineman is when the thrower of the football releases the ball is what matters. And if you go back, yes, by the time the UNC player caught the ball, the UNC offensive lineman was probably 6 yards downfield, which is more than the 3 yards you're allowed downfield as a lineman on passing plays. But that's irrelevant. Again, it doesn't matter where a lineman is at the time the ball is caught. It matters where he is at the time the ball is thrown. And when Drake May let go of that ball, that lineman, the video is there for all the world to see. His feet are less than 3 yards downfield. His shoulders are basically 3 yards downfield. And if you want to argue that his hands or his wrists were in the end zone on a play that started at the 3 yard line, so he would have been 3 yards and inches past the line of scrimmage at the time May let go of the ball, go ahead and argue, if you like, that the referee missed a call that was a foot or inches over the line. I don't even think it's clear on video. But the idea that the same freaking people who don't even know the rule rose all the way to the level of attacking the integrity of the referees on the field as if they purposely wanted one team to win and one team to lose. That is just QAnon level conspiracy theory nonsense, and smart people have to be better than that. The failure to review the catch by Bryson Nesbitt was a disaster and unacceptable. The rest of the stuff was really same old, and it's only the whiny college sports fans and the conspiracy theorists who don't have the evidence to back it up that end up being the ones complaining the most.
All right, let's talk about a couple guys we've talked about kind of ad nauseum over the last couple of weeks during our show, and that's the status of East Carolina's Mike Houston and Appalachian State Sean Clark in terms of their jobs moving forward after this year, DG. Both of those teams got big road wins last week. We already talked about the Mountaineers and their win at Georgia State. The Pirates on the road, a win at FAU.
Yeah, I think the bottom line here in both cases, Mike Houston at ECU, Sean Clark at App State, we all know they're both football-centric schools. So there's way more scrutiny on the football coach than there is, for example, if a men's basketball coach is struggling for a little bit while. That's the reality. That's how they pay their bills in those athletic departments, and that's why there has been some hot seat conversation around these two guys. On the list of ways that athletic directors measure coaches, it's a lot, but on that list are two things. Do you get better as the season goes along? And does your locker room stay together when stuff is flying sideways? And the answer in both cases, with Mike Houston having the Pirates playing pretty good defense all year, but A, sticking together, B, putting together their best win most recently, and C, getting better as the season goes along. I think those three things apply to both Mike Houston and Sean Clark. And two of those great coaching signs are when the locker room sticks together through adversity and when a team shows significant improvement from August to November or December. Both of those things are happening with App State and ECU football right now. And, of course, the Mountaineers have another huge road test this week that we'll get to in a bit. The Pirates are going to be scrutinized how they perform, even though it's not going to be a bowl year for ECU the way it is for App State. These details matter for hot seat coaches down the stretch. And the least you can say for those guys is that they do have the arrow pointed back in the right direction after really rough starts.
All right, it's time now for our Sport Clips MVP of the Week presented by Sport Clips. Mike Waddell and the coach Jimmy Collins sitting down for a wide-ranging conversation on a lot of different things, including NIL, the portal, and much more. So for that, we say hi to our pals Mike Waddell and Jimmy Collins. Mike.
Thanks, Chris. And Coach Jim Collins, let's talk recruiting right now. Not just high school football recruits, but the portal recruits. How much time are coaching staffs around college football right now spending scouting other teams to figure out who they want to poach and bring in through the portal?
Well, obviously, we're in a situation in today's world in college football that you have to have what I refer to in my short time in the NFL. We had a pro personnel staff that evaluated every player and put a grade on every player in the NFL. And then you had your college scouting department who did the exact same thing in college football. Well, what we're in right now in college football is your pro personnel staff is the transfer portal. So you better have an idea of what you're looking for positionally and who's available out there and who possibly could become available out there. And then obviously your high school, your college recruiting staff is the high school. So it's critical that you evaluate constantly. We now have in college football, and a lot of people may not realize this, we now have what's called general managers in college football. So the general manager manages the roster of your program, and he manages it and says, okay, we have 2 running backs on our team. We need to take 1 out of the portal. We need to take 2 out of high school, whatever it may be positionally. So arranging your roster at this point in time for a signing day in December and then another signing day in February is absolutely critical. But Mike, not to be long-winded with this answer, but what a lot of people don't realize is that people coming out of the portal, they don't sign a scholarship. They can make a decision, and I think the days are limited at this point in time. I could decide to transfer from the University of North Carolina to whatever university and be there in January. Then I can decide to transfer again at the end of April. Because you're not tied to a scholarship at that point in time, and you're not tied to a national letter. So managing your roster right now is huge.
How do the coaches go about getting in contact with those players when it's against the rules to initiate that contact? Are they using back channels, talking to their high school coaches, or are they just doing it and hoping they don't get caught?
Most of the time it's done on a legal basis. And so the high school coach is heavily involved, or there's so many street agents out there right now. There's no telling who you may get a phone call from, and you may get a call that's saying that, hey, Mike Waddell, who is playing at X university, is interested in transferring to your school. Would you guys be interested? So to get the reaction, and it becomes shopping around at this point in time. So we're in a world right now that all of that's hard to police. I don't know how the NCAA polices that at this point in time, and obviously they can't. So there's lots of avenues where you can find out who's going to be available and who you may be interested in.
That's always gone on in college basketball. When I was the AD at Towson back in the early 2010s, I was dealing with an AAU coach in the Mid-Atlantic who was telling me, hey, if you make a change with your head coach, my guy is going to leave. I then talked to the player who says he wants to come meet with me. He sits down and says, hey, if you don't make a change, I'm going to leave. So the next week I have the player, his AAU coach, and his mother all in my office and say, hey, I really don't care if you stay or go. It's not going to make any difference in what we do with our head coaching position. I mean, it's really tough, but has that always gone on the football side, even when you had to sit out if you did go between one school and another?
Well, it's become quite a bit more complicated as we've moved into the era that we're in now with the transfer portal. You always had the street agent in certain areas of the country, and the street agent that was negotiating for a player, whether he was going to go to this school or that school or whatever it may be. But at this point in time, what's happened is the high school coach used to be the most important thing that you dealt with. And then the high school coach, I shouldn't say the most important, the parents, whether it be the mother or whether it be the dad or a combination of the two, then the high school coach. But at this point in time, I'm not sure the high school coach is that important anymore. And it's become who the street agent is and what the parents and what they think they can achieve with a transfer or as a high school player choosing the correct school. So it's a very complicated procedure at this point in time.
You mentioned that big-time college football programs now have a general manager. Staffs have exploded in size since 1996 when you were a part of the national championship staff at the University of Florida with the ball coach, Steve Spurrier. How many people were on your staff, top to bottom, in 1996?
Well, we obviously we only had 9 assistants at that point in time. I was actually the recruiting coordinator, and I had a lady by the name of Betty Ling who was my administrative assistant, and she was absolutely fantastic at that point in time. We had 2 GAs, so basically we had a staff of less than 20 that did absolutely everything that we needed to do. I'm going to use David Cutcliffe for an example at this point in time, because David was on our show last week. When we were at Duke, basically we had the 9 or 10 assistant coaches, 2 GAs, and a few recruiting people. We had about 20 to 22 people. Well, the size of that staff at Duke now has absolutely doubled since they changed head coaches there. So the number of people that you have that are working in recruiting and working in public relations with your team and high school relations and all that has so blown out of proportion right now. It's unreal.
Some stats that I looked at over the last week in the SEC, the Big Ten, in the ACC, and the Big 12, 60 to 70 people. My question in all of this is, the big story right now in college football is what's going on at Michigan. Jim Harbaugh suspended for the rest of the regular season by the Big Ten commissioner. And he's saying that I didn't know what was going on. Coming up on Friday, there's going to be a hearing. And my guess would be that Jim Harbaugh will be on the sidelines for the final 2 games of this season. Now, that's just my guess. I don't have any inside information. Nobody does. But my question to you is, with so many people on a staff like that, 60, 70 people, is it out of the realm of comprehension that perhaps the head football coach did not know what was going on in his own program?
Mike, I would say as the CEO of said company, it is your responsibility to know what's going on within your company. And that's basically what college football is right now. And the head coach is the CEO. And I'm gonna bounce this back at you, Mike, as an administrator at a lot of big time programs in college football. If a request for travel came across your desk for someone that was not one of your 10 assistant coaches or the head coach, would you not question why you were getting a travel allowance for someone that was not one of those people going on a recruiting trip?
The answer is that never came across my desk, even at that level. It would have gone across the football operations person, then would have gone to maybe the second or third person in our business office. And my guess would be that if somebody was really trying to pull a fast one, they probably had a workaround to even keep it off of their radar. That's my honest answer. But the NCAA doesn't look at it like that. And I kind of asked you a rhetorical question because you're exactly right. If you're the CEO, it doesn't really matter if you are making an effort or not. You're responsible for it because you're the guy. So you've got to take control over that. I just think we continue to jump the shark. And we talked about it earlier in the week on Wild Dogs and Hogs, available right here on the Old North State Tailgate. You're paying $76 million buyouts. You have 70-plus member staffs. College football, along with its 82 bowl teams this year, and right now only 56 teams are eligible for 82 spots. So it's quite possible that we'll have 500, if not below 500 winning teams or losing teams, if you want to call it like that, that are going to go play in the postseason. It really does feel like, for all of the complaints about who runs college football, that somebody needs to get in there and just bring some order to this, because it's completely, your term from earlier in the show, has jumped the shark.
What's happened in our world now is there's so much money involved with TV. And when you're looking at the ACC, the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, et cetera, the Big Four, which used to be the Power Five, and now it's obviously the Pac-12 has been absolutely hammered. when you start researching that and the NCAA's power, there's so much money involved. So you're going to tell me the NCAA is going to get involved at the University of Michigan and tell the University of Michigan that they're not eligible for the Big Ten championship, they're not eligible for a bowl game, and they're not eligible for the playoffs, with all the money that's involved in that? That's not going to happen, Mike. It's not going to happen. There's too much money involved. The investigations that used to happen, SMU getting the death penalty many, many years ago. That's the biggest bunch of BS now that there possibly can be. They're going to tell you those conferences are going to say, hey, we're not listening to you. We're moving forward. We will handle our issues within our house.
That's Jim Collins. I'm Mike Waddell. Listen to us every week on Wild Dogs and Hogs right here on the North Carolina Sports Network. For now, let's kick it back to Dave Glenn and my main man, Chris Edwards.
All right, Mike, thanks so much. When we come back, David and I will go inside our XL Moving and Storage Big Four Games of the Week. That's next. Sport Clips is like no other place you've ever gotten your haircut. Sports everywhere. TVs everywhere playing sports. And guys, smart stylists who know how to give you the haircut you want and the haircut you need. You don't ever need an appointment. Walk-ins are welcome, and you'll walk out feeling like an MVP, guaranteed. Be sure to ask about the MVP experience, as it's something you just can't put into words. Awesome haircut, hot steam towel, invigorating shampoo, neck and shoulder treatment. It takes a haircut and turns it into an event. Sport Clips, a proud partner of the North Carolina Sports Network.
In sports, we talk a lot about impact players who make a positive difference. When it comes to our state's economy, the North Carolina pork industry is a true MVP. Each year, the pork industry plays an important role in supporting rural communities across our state. It contributes more than $10 billion a year to the North Carolina economy and supports more than 44,000 jobs. Learn more about their positive impact at ncpork.org. The North Carolina Pork Council, the foundational partner of the North Carolina Sports Network.
Welcome back to our Old North State Tailgate presented by NC Pork. I'm Chris Edwards. Great to be with David Glenn. DG, time now to go inside our XL Moving and Storage Big Four Games of the Week. And we'll start with the big one nationally, as we usually do. It's 10-0 Washington at 8-2 Oregon State. Washington trying to stay in the hunt for a college football playoff berth. And with a loss, they fall into the ranks of those one-loss teams where a lot could happen if you're a one-loss team looking for a playoff spot in this 4-team playoff.
Yeah, Chris, that's well put. We included this game in part because it is the biggest upset risk for any of the 5 remaining undefeated teams in the Power 5 conferences. 8-2 Oregon State is actually a 2-point favorite against the 10-0 Huskies in this one. And in part, we included this game because it's a good chance to remind college football fans of an angle that you just brought up. There's still a chance that there are 4 undefeated Power 5 conference champions this season, meaning those top teams that can usually rely on, a mulligan to choose a golf concept where you lose once, but if you come back and you finish as a 12-1 Power 5 champion, and remember, Power 5 champion is by definition and by rule gets heavy weight according to the selection committee. In most years, you can lose once and still make the playoff under those circumstances. Right now, you have 10-0 Georgia in the SEC, 10-0 Florida State in the ACC, 10-0 Washington in the Pac-12 heading into this at-risk game. And then you have both 10-0 Michigan and 10-0 Ohio State in the Big Ten. Now, obviously, either the Wolverines or the Buckeyes will lose a game because they play each other next weekend in that regular season finale. But that still means there could be 4 13-0 conference champions, and that has never happened in the 10 years of this 4-team college football playoff format It probably won't happen this time. And we have had a year where there were 3 13-0 conference champions, but even that allowed one 12-1 team to squeeze in there. You better keep winning, even if you're 10-0. Otherwise, you're definitely going to be asking for help to get into that Final Four.
All right, let's turn our focus towards some teams in our backyard now. North Carolina at Clemson this week. Mac Brown saying earlier this week that Clemson was back to being the Clemson of old, so it's a tougher challenge for the Tar Heels maybe this week on the road.
Yeah, I think that's a slight exaggeration, but I'll agree with Mac Brown if what he means is Clemson is closer to the Clemson of old here in November than it was when it lost to Duke on Labor Day night, or its other stumbles earlier this season on the way to this 6-4 record, which by Clemson standards is really, really mediocre. The Tigers have won 5 straight in this rivalry against the Tar Heels, and they've won 10 of the last 12 dating back to 1999. It has been 22 years since the Tar Heels won at Death Valley, where, of course, this week's game is being played. This is not a vintage Clemson team, despite what Coach Brown said at 6-4. But the Tigers have played some of the best defense in the ACC all season long. And that's what makes this such a fascinating matchup in my eyes. Carolina has not only those talented players we were talking about, but the ACC's highest scoring offense. The Heels are at 40 points per game. And they have that big-time talent everywhere you look at the skill positions, at least. Drake May, QB, Omarion Hampton at running back, Tez Walker and others at wideout, Bryson Nesbitt and others at tight end. However, the Tigers' front seven on defense is significantly better than Carolina's offensive line, which has been solid but not at all dominant. Bottom line, there's going to be a lot of NFL-caliber talent on the field when the Tar Heels have the ball. The harder to predict aspect of this game is how Clemson's talented but very inconsistent offense performs against the Carolina defense that started this season very well through maybe 5 games, but has just gradually been wearing down and even falling apart as the season has progressed. The 4 teams that have beaten Clemson, Duke, FSU, Miami, and NC State, all did it in large part by getting their defense to fluster the young Clemson quarterback, Cade Klubnik. And this Carolina defense just has not been making life difficult for opposing ACC quarterbacks over these last 4 weeks. If you can't upset third-string true freshman Grayson Loftus of Duke, I'm not sure how you're going to upset Cade Klubnik with the home fans of Death Valley cheering him on.
So you like the Tigers in this one?
I do like the Tigers, and it's going to be incumbent on that Carolina offense to put up a much bigger number than most do against Clemson. But also, Cedric Gray's been fine. Power Eccles has been fine. Kamen Rucker has been great at defensive end. Those guys need help. And they just can't give up the easy touchdowns where they lose contain on the perimeter at least twice against Duke. That's just handing your opponent 14 points. When it comes to touchdowns, you got to make people throw into small windows. You got to make them fight for every inch. And Carolina, whether it's mental mistakes or missed assignments, they've just been gifting touchdowns to sometimes even struggling offenses. That to me will be even, the even bigger key to the game is whether Carolina can get closer to that team that bothered South Carolina's quarterback, Spencer Rattler, and ran out of the stadium, Syracuse's quarterback and Pitt's quarterbacks and Minnesota's quarterbacks. I don't know where that Carolina defense has gone, but it's going to have to show up at Death Valley to get a win, and I just don't think that's going to happen.
Speaking of teams on the road, NC State on the road this week. The Wolfpack, as we mentioned earlier, have won 3 in a row as they visit a Virginia Tech team that's kind of middling there in the middle of the ACC pack.
Yeah, most of our audience knows this Wolfpack story well, maybe in part because they join us every week. But folks may not realize that Virginia Tech also is playing its best football of the season right now. The Hokies have won 4 of their last 6, and the only losses are at Florida State and at Louisville. I mean, that's all on the road against the 2 teams that are most likely going to play each other for the ACC championship. Virginia Tech has demolished Pitt, Wake Forest, Syracuse, and Boston College in its last 4 wins. What changed for the Hokies? Everything is the short answer, but dual threat quarterback Kyron Drones has energized the Tech offense. And the head coach at Tech, Brent Pry, who's a former defensive coordinator at Penn State, where they've been known to play good defense. He has the Hokies, I would say, playing their best defense as at any time during his now 2-year tenure in Blacksburg. The key to this game to me will be how NC State's defense handles Kyron Drones, because as great as the Wolfpack has played on defense pretty much all season, it has not faced a lot of dual threat quarterbacks. The guys who can run for 100-plus yards one week, but then throw for 250-plus against a different defensive alignment and a different opponent another week. Kyron Drones is that kind of guy, and that's the Wolfpack's challenge. The Hokies are a 2-point favorite in this game in Blacksburg, which is traditionally a hard place to win. But I like State's mental state. I love how it's playing on defense. And I do think as the Las Vegas underdog, the Wolfpack is going to figure out a way to get maybe an ugly win.
Our final game that we're going to talk about this week, DG, is a big challenge for the Mountaineers, playing a lot better, but they're on the road at 10-0 James Madison this week. Tall task for Sean Clark's club.
No doubt about it. How about ESPN's College Game Day picking this matchup for a visit to Harrisonburg, Virginia? That's really cool. Mm-hmm. James Madison is 10-0. Is in the national top 25, is 6-0 in Sun Belt play. And remember, this is just JMU's second season as an FBS member and just their second season as a Sun Belt member. And obviously they have made that jump from FCS superpower, just as App State successfully made this jump years ago, to an extremely impressive FBS program. As the debate continues about whether James Madison should be allowed to go to a bowl, they're still in that adjustment period where you're ineligible. I don't think the NCAA is going to budge on that. But when it comes to Saturday's matchup, the Dukes have played several close games. It's not like they're 10-0 beating everybody by 3 touchdowns. They won by a point, 36-35, at Virginia of the ACC early this season, and that was before the Cavaliers started playing better. So I don't think the Dukes are a runaway freight train. I actually think App State's offense is better than James Madison's offense. But JMU's defense, for those who don't watch a lot of Sun Belt, they're right up there, I would say, next to Troy as the 2 best defenses in the Sun Belt Conference. So huge challenge for Joey Aguilar, the quarterback for the Mountaineers, who's been really good for them. Noel is back from his injury at running back. Challenge for that offensive line of Sean Clark and the running game more generally. The Mountaineers are 10-point underdogs on the road, as you might expect. But this is an extremely exciting opportunity for App. And I consider it one of those like free wax at the piñata. Nobody expects you to win. Few are predicting you to win. But if you do win at 10-0 JMU with game day in attendance, you change the arc of Sean Clark's coaching career. You change the perception of App State football, which has sagged a little bit these last 2 seasons. And, of course, you do get to, no matter what happens, experience one more college game day environment, which is what Boone had a little bit more than a year ago for the first time.
All right, DG, time now for our closing thoughts presented by Organize for Success. Get us out of here today on your closing thought.
Yeah, as we get closer to Thanksgiving, I just want to remind folks that there's the chance for some special seasons in college football. Most of the biggest opportunities have gone by the wayside. Some fans are turning the page to college basketball. But remember, Carolina is 8-2. In this state, especially at the FBS level, 9 wins is considered a good season. But when Carolina finished 9-5 last year, it had a hollow feel to it because the Heels lost 4 in a row to end the season. Now, in what is almost certainly quarterback Drake May's final season in Chapel Hill, the Heels are 8-2 with another difficult stretch to close this campaign at Clemson, as we discussed, at NC State to finish the regular season, and then probably a challenging bowl opponent. In my opinion, only if the Heels can win at least 2 of those 3 games to get to the more rarefied air of a 10-win season will Drake May's last year be considered a true success story. In other places, State is 7-3. Don't forget that as up and down of a roller coaster ride this season has been for the Wolfpack with the coaching change and some early injuries and some disappointing losses, if somehow State wins in Blacksburg in the game we just discussed, beats the Heels at Carter Finley at the end of the regular season, and then wins its bowl game, That would be only the second 10-win season in Wolfpack history. I mean, we've been playing college football since long before any of us were born. And even as schedules have expanded, of course, there's at least more opportunities for 10-win seasons. State has only one. It was Phillip Rivers' team, coached by Chuck Amato in 2002, when they went 11-3 and beat Notre Dame in the Gator Bowl. If this State team can get to 10 wins, given those injuries and the crazy quarterback complications and limitations, it would not only be a truly amazing feat, I think it would be the best coaching job of Dave Doran's 11 years in Raleigh. Finally, there are several other dream seasons still possible. We mentioned that NC Central, now 8-2, probably lost its Celebration Bowl dream. There's an avenue for the Eagles to still get there and maybe win the HBC National Championship, but now they need help, and that help is unlikely to come. What is possible, though, is that Central finishes the regular season with a win and could get an at-large invitation to the FCS playoffs. They have been an FCS team for more than a decade now. They've never played in the FCS playoffs because of that arrangement where the MEAC champion goes to the Celebration Bowl instead. That would be a huge feather in the cap of Trey Oliver, and the Eagles would still have a chance of finishing with its highest national ranking ever as an FCS team. Western Carolina is 7-3. The Catamounts are a fun team to watch under Kerwin Bell, a high-scoring team. They're expected to win this weekend and finish 8-3. If they do, they would be a good candidate for an at-large bid to what is now a 24-team FCS playoff bracket. I bring up the Catamounts because we look for things to celebrate here on the David Glenn Show and the Old North State Tailgate podcast. And the Catamounts have been to the FCS playoffs only one time in their history. It was 40 years ago. So good luck to Kerwin Bell and the Catamounts, not only this week's game, but when that selection committee sits down to pick those. I think it's 14 at-large teams to go with 10 automatic bids for the conference champions. And finally, Gardner-Webb has a chance to win a conference title this week. They demolished Tennessee Tech 35-0 last week. They took one step closer to what would be their second straight Big South title, which is now a partnership with the Ohio Valley Conference. With a home win over Charleston Southern this Saturday at Spangler Stadium in Boiling Springs, the Bulldogs would clinch their fourth Big South championship since they joined that league in 2001, and their second in a row under their fourth-year head coach Trey Lamb. A win would also clinch the automatic bid to the FCS playoffs, which the Bulldogs participated in for just the first time ever last year when they won their opener in those playoffs and reached the round of 16. So that's Central as an FCS playoff possibility, Western Carolina as a possible at-large team, and Gardner-Webb controls its destiny. With a win this week, they'd get the automatic bid. Finally, at the D2 level, let's celebrate Lenore-Rhyne. The Bears are 10-1. They deserve congratulations not only for becoming one of the most consistently successful programs in North Carolina at any level in football. They are the South Atlantic Conference champions for the 9th time in the last 13 years, and they have clinched their 7th all-time bid to the D2 playoffs. So hats off to fourth-year head coach Mike Jacobs. His team is 10-1 as it hosts this Saturday 9-2 Shepherd at Moretz Stadium in Hickory. With a win, Lenore-Rhyne would reach the Sweet 16 and a second-round matchup against a number 1 seed, Benedict, which is an HBCU program based in Columbia, South Carolina. That team is 11-0 this season, so I'm not assuming a Lenore-Rhyne win this week, but it would not be a brutal road trip for the Bears if they make it to the Sweet 16. Columbia, South Carolina, not too far away. But I just outlined at least 6 teams out of our dozens here in North Carolina that have a chance to put the cherry on top of good seasons and turn them into something really special.
Well, we're looking forward to all of that as we continue down the stretch of this college football season. That'll do it for us this week on the Old North State Tailgate, an exclusive presentation of the North Carolina Sports Network. Our foundational partner is the North Carolina Port Council. Thanks to our special guests, Mike Waddell and Jimmy Collins. For David Glenn, I'm Chris Edwards, signing off for this edition of the Old North State Tailgate, the official tailgating soundtrack of the 2023 football season. right here on the North Carolina Sports Network. We'll see you next week.